This video will show you a number of things you can do with your spreadsheet to make it look better and to make it more useful for you. We're going to use the spreadsheet that we just exported out of PowerTeacher to show you some of these features to make it just a little bit more useful for you. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is talk about how to select the whole worksheet. To select the whole worksheet, you click in the upper left-hand corner here, and you just do one click here, and you'll notice that the whole spreadsheet turns light blue. That tells you that it is all selected, and whatever you do to that spreadsheet up here in formatting will happen to the whole spreadsheet. For instance, if I clicked on the bold, in this case, it would turn the whole spreadsheet text bold. Well, I don't want to do this, so I can either click the bold again to undo it, or if I have it bold, I can always go up here to my undo button. And remember that button later on, whenever you do something to a spreadsheet that you don't want to keep, if you make a mistake, you just can undo the formatting or the change that you made. So we're going to unclick that bolding. So if I want to unselect the whole spreadsheet, then I'll click anywhere in the spreadsheet. The other thing you can do is select one row or one column, and you do that by clicking to select a row. You click in the 1, and you notice that that whole row is light blue. Well, I decided I don't really want that row, so to delete a whole row, you click on it to select it, and then you right-click on it and choose Delete. And you notice how it put all the headers then up in the top row, which is where I wanted them. You can do the same thing with a column. You can click and select the whole column. And if you want to hold your, you can hold the control key down, and you can click on more than one column as well. You notice I'm holding the control key down, and I'm selecting a number of columns at the same time, just by clicking up in that letter up at the top. Okay, once you've selected all of those columns, you can do a number of different things. A lot of times in a spreadsheet, especially like when you're using it in the classroom, you may want to have like a bunch of boxes where you would make check marks off on the spreadsheet. So at that time, to do that, you would select your rows or your columns in this case, and you would hold your cursor up in the letter area until it became a line with 2 arrows on it, and then you just hold the left mouse key down and you pull over as far as you want those columns to be. And if you notice, then all those columns are exactly the same width. That's the nice part about doing that rather than doing these one at a time. Now, let's make this a little bit easier to see. Excel will default to have light blue grid lines, which are sometimes hard to see. So if you want to select all the grid lines in the whole worksheet, you click up here in that upper left-hand corner to select the whole worksheet. And there's a little icon up here that looks like a dotted box. You can click on that, click on all borders, and that'll give us all of our borders and grid lines in a dark black color, which makes it a little bit easier to see. Now, I just accidentally left it all selected, and I want to undo that. I didn't want to do that, so remember your undo button's up here. So I'm clicking in here, and then the whole spreadsheet is unselected one more time. Okay, we're going to do a few things with formatting the spreadsheet so that it looks a little bit nicer for you to read. The first thing we're going to do is select these rows. And I would like these rows to be all the same width, and I'd like them a little wider. So I'm just clicking and selecting, and I'm holding the left mouse key down and selecting those rows. And again, I want to make those rows all the same width. And so I put my cursor in there again, and then I have them all the same width. Okay, I'm going to select again, click anywhere in the spreadsheet to unselect it. Now I want the data in these 2 columns right here, so I'm going to click on one of them and turn it blue, and I'm going to select the next one, the gender, and I want the data in these 2 columns not to be left or right justified. It's kind of hard to read there. I'd like those center. So once I've got the columns selected, I'm going to go up here to my center button and click on that to center the data in those 2 columns. So if you notice, we still have our names over here left justified in the column, but we have our grade and gender with a center alignment. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is spread this. We're going to go up here. I want to spread this out a little ways. And if you notice, I've got a nice blank column. That kind of happens by default sometimes in PowerSchool. I've got a nice blank column here. And one of the things I want to do is I do not like my names, my data like this with last name, comma, first name. I like to have my names in separate columns. It's really easy to do in Excel. I'm going to select that column again, and then I'm going to go up to the data icon up here. So I've got home, insert, page layout, formulas. Click on data. And the term to separate the column is called text to columns. And so I'm going to click on text to columns. And it'll bring up a wizard for you to follow through. It's pretty easy to do. You can try it a couple times. If you don't like how it turns out, you can always use your undo button. But we're gonna leave it the delimited text, and we're gonna click on next, and it'll say, how do you want your data separated? Well, I want my data separated by a comma. So every time this data sees a comma, I want it to separate the data out. So I'm gonna say next, and then I'm gonna say finish. Last we do, am I sure I want to do this? And I'm saying yes, I am. And so if you notice now, we have the last name and the first name in separate columns. So that name's going to be, I'm going to change the name of my column to make more sense. Last name, and then first name. And now I have my columns kind of pretty much like I want them to be. I'm going to, I would like a little more formatting just to make it clear which is the heading, and I'm going to say I want that to be bold. So I'm going to go back to my home button where most of my formatting things are, and I'm going to click on bold for that row. That'll make all the headings in that first row bold. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I really don't want to have Betty Jones' name first and then Amos Martin and Levi Brown and Harry Smith. It just doesn't make much sense to me. So again, I'm going to select the whole worksheet by clicking up in the upper left-hand corner, and I'm going to start sorting my data. And again, I go back to that data button. You'll use, for the most part, you're going to use home and you're going to use the data button. And you're going to sort it. So you click on the little sort icon, and it'll say, how do you want to sort this? And I want to sort it by last name. But then I also want to add a level, and I want to just, so I click on this add a level, and then I want it sorted by first name. And so I click OK. And so now I've got my this data is sorted, and if you notice, all the data goes along with it. I've got my data sorted by last name, first name. And I can decide, you know, I really didn't want to do that. I wanted my data sorted by grade level. And so I just click back on my sort icon up here up in the bar, and I just say, I don't really want this level, so I say I'm going to delete that. I don't want that first. I really want to sort by grade. And then, you know, then let's go by last name. So it should sort all my data by grade and last name. So I'm going to say last name and click OK. So now I have all my 9th graders, again, in alphabetical order. And if I go down where my 10th graders starts, they're by alphabetical order as well. You notice that. So you can sort lots of different ways. You can also, up in here, is filter the data out. And I could say, you know what, I'd like to see all the students, but I really want to get a list of all the male students. So in that time, again, notice that my whole spreadsheet is selected. I'm going to filter out my females. I'm going to click on that little filter button. And the nice thing about filters, you got to remember that the data doesn't go anywhere. It's just not visible to you when you filter it. And what do I want filtered? I just want to see the males. And so I'm going to click here, and it'll leave the sorts the way it are, but it'll only give me the males. So that's a kind of a fun feature to use to just make looking at the data a little bit easier. So again, if I want to get rid of that filter, I can just go up here and click here and get rid of the filter, and if you notice, it brought all the females back into the row. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to play a little bit more with the font on these. I would like my last name and my first name columns to be bold as well. So if you notice, I selected those 2 columns just by clicking and dragging. Go back to my home menu. I click on the home menu and I choose bold for those. So click on bold, and it made the first name and the last name bold, the grade and the gender smaller. Now remember, I want to go over one more thing again. I'd like a few more of my columns here to be narrow, like these. So I'm going to select all of these columns here, and I put my cursor between here, I go like this, and I make them all the same. Then I can use this for a check mark. Now, suppose I want to use this spreadsheet to, like, for instance, record field trip permissions. So let's say I'm going to click in this one, and I'm going to say this first column is going to be, I'm going to put a check mark as soon as they've turned in their field trip permission slip. Not very easy to read, right? It's kind of difficult to read, and it just makes it hard to know what I wanted to say there. So what you can do at that point is you can change the direction of the text of this. I'm going to show you a little button up here. It's kind of has an A-B with a slanted uh, kind of an arrow. And what that does is change the rotation of the text. And what we're going to do for this case is we're going to rotate the text up. And it's going to look like that. But it's like, oh, it's kind of hard to see. All you need to do is go over here. Remember how you can move the width of the columns or the width of the rows. You put your cursor over there. You were at like this. And then you can see all of your things are a little bit easier to read. And it still lets you keep your columns the same width. The way again, it's like if you don't really like that, you could, it's like I really don't like it that way, you go back up here, and you know, you could, depending on what you're doing, you can do the angle there. Makes it a little difficult to read unless you have a lot of them. I think most people decide that they'd like that text rotated up. If you prefer to rotate it down, you can rotate the text down and look at it that way, depending on your point of view. And again, I would like that in my center of my my column there. So then I just click on that column and I center the text. And then you can do a lot of different things depending on if you're printing this out in color, what you're doing with, or shading. You can also use the shading button up here. It just depends on what you're going to be doing with it. I decided to shade that one yellow, but most of the time, you know, in this, don't use that feature too much. You can also change the color of the text, and sometimes I'll do that to just make it clearer to understand and easier to see. So that's kind of how you can change some of the text around on that spreadsheet. Now, when you're getting ready to print your spreadsheet, you usually don't want the whole thing. You don't want any of these extra cells and everything when you're ready to print it. So what you want to do then is, again, just start with this in your, I'm pulling over here. I'm just holding the left mouse key down and pulling over. A little bit of practice, you can get this pretty easy. And I'm going to go down, and I'm selecting just the area that I want printed. So I really only want that printed. And if it's blue like that, that should work pretty good. It'll be the section that you print. So then you go up to File and Print. And then when you're choosing to print, you'll have the choice here, Print What? And you print Selection. And then the only thing it'll print out is those particular cells that you selected. All right. Hopefully this helped a little bit with moving some things around, and you'll use some of these skills when you create the spreadsheet based on your data that you pull out of PowerTeacher.